Hey guys, welcome back. So today we are finally going to talk about one of my favorite things to do and probably the only thing that I do consistently besides making coffee every day and going to the bathroom, and that's budgeting. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Christina and I like to talk about all things low buy, spending wisely, budgeting, debt repayment, and anything in between on this channel. So if you're interested in seeing more, please remember to hit subscribe. I would love to see you back. In almost every single one of my low buy videos, I mentioned the budget at least once. At least. So before I started my debt-free journey, I barely budgeted. And every single month, it felt like I was just chasing my money and always stressing about money and wondering where that money went. I always kind of had an idea of where my money needed to go each month, but I never really wrote numbers down. I didn't have a confident or concrete sense of how much I made each month, how much I needed to put into my student loan repayment in order to be debt-free by a certain time. I always just kind of had these assumptions floating around in my head, but I never really knew. And I was comfortable with that for a long time. I was okay with it. I thought it was normal. I was almost used to stressing and worrying about money on a daily basis and saying things like, oh, I'll figure it out later, only to realize I had racked up an insane credit card bill every single month. And any plans that I had made financially that month would have to go out the window because I needed to pay off my credit card bills. So I was always just chasing my money, always trying to catch up with it instead of me having control over it and telling it where to go and knowing exactly where it needed to be. And within all this, I was still prioritizing shopping and buying new things on a weekly basis, living this Instagrammable lifestyle. And all the while I was still wondering why I hadn't reached any of my financial goals, why my student loan debt was going down as slow as molasses it felt like. I felt like I was putting all this money into it each month and not seeing the numbers move even a little bit. And that's because I just had no idea. I had no idea where my money was going. I was spending it on stuff on a weekly basis and I had to stop. And that will bring me into my first tip when it comes to budgeting. You need to know why you're doing it. So for me, I had to have my I've had it moment. Dave Ramsey talks about it quite a lot, and the budgeting method that I use is the Zero-Based Budgeting Method by Dave Ramsey. Anything I'm about to share with you today is nothing new, it's nothing original really, it's all from Dave Ramsey's teachings, and if you're interested in learning more about his method, then I'll leave a bunch of links and videos down below for you guys. And the reason I say you need to know your why is because you're not gonna budget if you don't know why you're budgeting. And you almost need to remind yourself of why you're doing it on a daily, weekly, or even monthly basis. Every single month before the first of the month begins, I will sit down for about 10 minutes and write out a budget. And I am doing it because I want to be financially free. I want to no longer be a prisoner in my student loan, and I want to start moving on with my life. And I can't really do that from a financial perspective if I have payments to make to somebody else every single month. So for me, I want to get out of debt. For you, do you want to start saving for a home? Do you want to save an emergency fund for your family? Do you want to travel? Do you want to quit your job and start your own business? There's a bunch of different reasons to be financially secure and to have control of your money, but you just need to remind yourself of what that is and stick with that. My second tip with budgeting is to figure out how you're going to do it. Whatever works for you, it doesn't really matter. You can use a spreadsheet in Excel, you can use an app like Mint, or I use the Every Dollar app by Dave Ramsey. You can write it out in a book. You can use a cash envelope system or a cookie jar system, whatever you want to do. Find a method that works for you and that you know that you can stick to. A budget doesn't work unless you actually do it. So once you have your why figured out and you have your medium in which you're going to start budgeting, the next thing you need to do is figure out how much you make. And that can be pretty easy if you're single, but if you are married or in a relationship where your finances are combined, then you will have to sit down with your partner or your family member and figure out how much you guys make together. So get to know your income, and that includes anything from your full-time job, from any side hustles or part-time gigs, from any closet or garage sales that you happen to be doing. All of your income needs to be written down, and you need to know how much you're making every single month. So once you know your income, the next thing to do is write down what your fixed expenses are. And if you don't know what a fixed expense is, that is any of the expenses that you have that is roughly the same amount every single month. You know that this is how much your rent is. You know that this is how much your phone bill is, your internet. Write down what your fixed expenses are. And this might take some time, especially if you're doing a budget for the first time. It would be a good idea, and I do highly recommend to do your own spending analysis, to sit down, look at your bank statements, and get an idea of how much all of your monthly expenses are, and also to see how much you're spending on variable expenses like groceries, coffee, entertainment. It is a good idea just to get a sense of how much you're spending each month, and then as you create your budget, you can also start to see where you have some wiggle room when it comes to your goals in your budget. So now that you got your income and now you've got your fixed expenses, you can start entering all your other common monthly expenses. And don't worry if your budget at the very beginning doesn't add up to zero. This is the goal at the end of each monthly budget, but you will see, especially as you create your first one, that you do end up going over in your estimates. This is where we start to see where we can pull from one expense into another in order to balance our budget to zero and start reaching our financial goals. Dave Ramsey teaches within the variable expenses, you always cover your 4 walls first. That's shelter, food, electricity, and transportation. Once you have that covered, you can start moving on to the other variable expenses in your budget. So things like coffee, personal care, skincare, getting your hair cut, monthly subscriptions like Netflix. So you start entering all those other expenses into your budget and see how much you come up with each month. And you'll see really quick if you do end up spending more than you make. And you can see really quick too where you can start cutting things. And it's really eye-opening. The numbers don't lie, and there's nothing, for me, I was quite embarrassed when I did my first budget and upset with myself when I saw how much I spent on things like restaurants, clothing, makeup. Those were all my vice kind of lifestyle expenses. And this brings me into my next tip. If you're trying to make a balanced budget and reach some financial goals and start paying off debt, you're gonna need to start making sacrifices. For some of us, it might mean a really drastic lifestyle shift in terms of what we spend on things we seemingly didn't think added up, but really do. So if you do have your why in mind, then you will be willing to make those sacrifices, and the numbers don't lie. Any of the money that I can cut out of my budget in terms of my fixed and variable expenses, I'm going to in order to start paying off debt. So that brings me into my next tip. If you are paying off debt, I am following the Dave Ramsey debt snowball, where you list your debt smallest to largest and you start tackling those debts. So when you do create a budget, you really have an idea of how much money you make, you know exactly where it's going, and you can start really throwing money on any outstanding debt that you have. You'll slowly but surely be knocking that debt off and reaching your debt-free goal in a lot faster time than you think. So this is why a budget is absolutely essential. You won't really know how much more you can put out on your debt until you do a budget. If you're interested in learning more about the baby steps and how I'm using those to pay off my student loan, I'll leave a bunch of links down below again for you guys. So the budgeting method that I use is a zero-based budgeting method. It is the method that I follow every single month. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're spending every single dollar that you earn in that month. It just means that you're assigning every dollar a place to go. You're assigning every dollar a name at the beginning of each month. So at the end, your income minus your expenses is always equal to zero, because that money has a place. Like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're spending it. It could be a certain amount of that monthly income is going into savings, is going into retirement. There's a place for each dollar. And this is a method that works for me. I have seen a lot of other different methods that sort of break up the money each month into like a pie, into a pool where 20% goes to savings and 30% goes to wants, and whatever those wants are, you can spend from that pool. Whatever method works for you, but for me, zero-based budgeting really helps, and keeping track of every dollar in my app as I spend it really just helps me stay on top of my behavior, my spending, and how much money I have left to go in the month. And some other tips that I have for you, if this is your first time budgeting, is it won't be perfect right away. And the numbers that you assign in terms of especially your variable expenses, you might not get those right the very first time. So it is important to revisit your budget on a daily, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever works for you basis, but revisit your budget, check in, see how much you've spent in whatever category. You might find that you need to increase that certain part of the budget, or you might find that you didn't spend as much as you thought you did, and you can move that extra money somewhere else. But there is going to be some give and take in your budget every single month, so it's important to revisit it and check on it often. And for me, because I use the Every Dollar app, it's very much a spending tracker as much as it is a budget. So anytime I spend any dollar, even if I spent $2.50 on a cup of coffee that day, that is going in my budget. And I've made a habit of checking my budget before I go to do things like grocery shopping, getting gas, anything like that. I always take a look and see how much I have left to spend before I do the thing. And I'll also do my best to enter the amount I spent almost immediately after I have spent the money. So if I'm putting gas in my car, not only am I checking how much I can spend, as soon as I get back into my car, I am entering how much I did spend. And that way I know how much I have left to go. That way I know if I'm done for the month. And it just really helps you stay on top of your behavior and how much wiggle room you have left in the month. It just keeps me on track and helps me just stay on top of my goals, because if I wasn't revisiting the budget as often as I am, that goal probably wouldn't be in my face as much as it is every single day right now. So a budget is a lot more than just keeping track of your money and managing your money. When you have a budget that works, that you feel good about, that you know where your money is going and that you have control over it, it gives you this sense of confidence and freedom that I can tell you I've never experienced before until I started budgeting. Before, I was super scatterbrained and stressed about my money all the time. I knew I had a good job and a good income, but never really seemed to have enough money at the end of each month. I always felt like I was struggling and living paycheck to paycheck. And now that I have my budget, I really have control over my spending, and that just gives you a sense of confidence that I never even realized I was missing. It reminds you that you're on the right track, that you are doing something for you, that you're that much closer to whatever goal you want to reach. And it's essential. It is absolutely essential. Out of anything I've ever talked about in terms of my low buy, shopping addiction, spending, debt, I would not be where I am now, and I wouldn't be moving in the direction that I want to be moving if I didn't do a budget. And that's how important it is. And that's not to say I don't go over budget. I definitely do. There are times when I feel like I want to buy something or spend money somewhere. I'm definitely not perfect when it comes to my budget, but I can say with certainty I am a lot better than I was. Old habits still tend to creep back in, but I almost feel a little bit of a ouch if I decide, okay, I want to get takeout tonight, so that means I'm gonna have to pull out of my grocery budget, for example. The budget for me is like a hard stop, and it's a reminder of what I am either about to do, or it's a stop for me to take a step back and reevaluate if I need the thing in my life or not, or if I really want to spend the money on something. Having that sense of where your money is going, how much money you have left, it just really shifts your mindset in terms of the value of money and how hard you're working for it, and kind of how long it can take or how fast it can be to reach a financial goal or not, depending on how you're spending. And another tip to consider is things like holidays and parties and other variable expenses that you might need to account for in that month. So if you know it's Mother's Day that month, then you can set aside a little bit of money to give your mom a card or a cake, or if it's somebody's wedding in that month. So take a look at your calendar before the month begins, and you can make a prediction of how much you should allot in that category if there are uncommon expenses in that coming month. So I hope that gave you guys some insight into how I budget and why I feel the budget is so important when it comes to any aspect of having financial security and financial confidence. It doesn't matter if you're in debt or not. It doesn't matter what your income is. Everybody needs to budget, and that budget is a tool to reach any financial goal that you have. Let me know if any of these tips helped you, and if there are any further tips that you guys have when it comes to your finances and your budget, please leave them down below for all of us to share. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and don't forget to hit subscribe. I would love to see you back, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.